from Kansas State University. This is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Here's what's coming up. With this week's cattle market comments, K-State's Glynn Tonsor. Among other things, Glynn will review the USDA's latest cattle on feed report, which had a slightly bearish tone to it. Also today, out of the Beef Cattle Institute at K-State, a look at rotational grazing management and the economics of rotational fencing. Brad White, Bob Larson, and Dustin Pendell with comments there. Also, K-State's Dale Blassie will preview the series of 3 K-State Winter Ranch Management Schools, the first of which is set for this Thursday. And Jeff Wickman later with this week's 4-H segment. He'll be joined by K-State's Anissa Jepsen for an update on several 4-H activities. All that right here on Agriculture Today.
Agriculture and food systems are the main drivers of the Kansas economy, but must be improved in order to feed the world's growing population. How are we going to do so? Reduce food loss, find ways to preserve grasslands, and help families stretch their dollars. Global food systems is one of the 5 grand challenges K-State Research and Extension is addressing. To learn more, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
Welcome once more to Agriculture Today. And to the cattle markets, the USDA cranking out its monthly cattle on feed report last Friday, and those numbers give the cattle markets something to hash over right out the chute today. We'll get into that and more with Glynn Tonsor, livestock economist, K-State Research and Extension. But first, Glenn, the trends from last week's trade. The future side showed a glimmer of promise last week. Let's start right there.
Yeah, we ended the week strong. The February live cattle contract closed the week at 116.5. It was up about $4 for the week, and a good chunk of that gain was on Friday. And that mirrored in many ways what happened in the feeder market as well. So the March feeder cattle contract closed at just over 144, up a full $9 for the week. And Friday was almost a limit up day. What was underneath that? And I think a couple things. One is we had a pullback on corn. So the CME March corn contract was down almost 25 cents on Friday. For quick recap, we're at about $5 a bushel on that contract now. We had gotten up to almost $5.40 just 2 weeks ago, and that was a notable increase from about $4.20 in the middle of December. So the corn rally has obviously been hitting the cattle markets, and we got some partial relief on that front on Friday. Meanwhile, before we go over to the cash trade here, I'll throw in, I think the other reason we had a bump up on the board was cutout prices rallied as the week went on. So choice cutout on Friday was $2.23, up almost $10 for the week, and select was about $10 lower at $2.13, also up $9 to $10. That choice select spread's pretty narrow, which is normal this time of year, and we need to monitor that as a demand signal if it gains between now and June. But to answer your question, we ended the week pretty strong with some optimism on the board. I think part of that was corn price relief, and part was good signs up the chain wholesale. But we didn't see that in the cash market yet. So we'll see if that shows up this week.
And you might go over the cash trade briefly here just for the record. Basically flat?
Yeah, I would call it flat overall. So, AMS reported fairly low volume in the Friday report for fed cattle, about 109. One of the reasons I think it was flat was we continue to have these increased weights. So the USDA reports a combined steer and heifer dressed weight, and it was about 900 pounds in the recent couple of weeks. That's a full 20 pounds heavier than the same point the year before. So we're not quite as current. We have some heavier animals there and so forth. I think that is, causing a little bit of a challenge. But nonetheless, I think there is some positive things in the market before we get to cattle and feed report here in a moment that hopefully will set the stage for this week. When we look over at feeder cattle, cash this past week, AMS called the Dodge City market mixed. There's individual lots up and some down. 2 lots I wrote down here were 303 head lot weighing 627, went for 149, and then a heavier lot weighing 722 went for 134. So those lighter weights would be basically on par with the week before. So cash was flat, the board was up. We'll see how that flushes out this coming week.
And once more, the trend may be set right out with the USDA cattle on feed report on Friday. Well, most thought that this would be an uneventful report, but turned out that there was a surprise in it.
Yeah, I would say there was one surprise. The January 1st inventory came in flat with where we were same time the year before. And Kansas was up about 3%, Nebraska up 4%, Colorado plus 2%. But that was offset by Texas being down 3% and Iowa down 9%. So this is an example where averages can be misleading. So, basically flat for the country, but regionally there's quite a bit of variation. But that was right in line with expectations. So in aggregate, I would not call that a surprise. And similarly, the December marketings came in about 1% higher than before. That met expectations as well. So not a surprise there. The one I do think was at least a partial surprise for some, and it would be for me, was the December placements. So they came up about 1% compared to the prior year, when the pre-report average across all the analysts that report those was for a decline in 3%. So that difference is probably going to show up in the market today, I guess. It's probably bearish for fed cattle prices in the May-June period. If we place more in December than we expected, that's roughly when we expect them to come out. But again, to that point on averages are misleading and regional variation, there's differences across states in that placement number. So the December placements here in Kansas were up 1% compared to the prior year and up 6% compared to November. Similar story in Nebraska. It was up 3% compared to the prior year and 4% higher than November. But that was very different than Texas. So Texas was down 7%, 6% respectively. So if you want to put a bow around that, as we went north, we placed more in December, where when you go down to Texas, they placed less compared to the prior month and prior year. So that's worth monitoring as well, because local supply and demand dictates a lot of your local outcomes. And those higher numbers coming out of those yards 4 to 6 months forward will probably be larger in the north.
Well, as listeners know, you track regularly and closely trends in beef demand, and we'll look at two fronts there. Your latest meat demand monitor, what is it indicating for the month of December now?
Yeah, so the latest one, as you said, is out for December, and it is a good news recovery story compared to November. So that measure, it's beef and pork checkoff supported separately for the retail or grocery store and the food service/restaurant channels. And ribeye, steak, and ground beef are two main items I track. And the demand for those products in both market channels was up in December compared to November, which is great. This is an example, however, that the November values are pretty low. So a lot of that is bouncing back compared to a negative base is one way to think about that. But regardless, December bounce back compared to November is a good thing. The other thing I made my note here is I actually just submitted it yesterday over the weekend, but look for Ag Manager. There'll be a longer report that summarizes those demand trends for the whole period of July through December. So again, because this is checkoff supported work, we're periodically posting reports, and there's a multi-month summary that's going to come up and kind of snapshot of what was going on in the second half of 2020, what did COVID do to those demand drivers and so forth. So be looking for that. But December ended up better than November on the demand front per that measure.
Encouraging to hear that. And the USDA has put out some meat consumer demand numbers. This goes back to the month of November, the most recent account here, on both the domestic and export fronts, comparing to pork and poultry. So what do those numbers tell us, Glynn?
Yeah, so you set the stage well there. Is keep the time period different here. Is these are kind of after the fact looking back, and therefore there's more of a time delay. So these most recent values are for the month of November, and we'd be comparing to either October or November of 2019. But on the domestic front, beef, pork, and chicken were all down in November compared to October, which is what I was trying to set the stage for a minute ago. The meat demand monitor improvement is consistent with that, so keep that in mind. November was a rough month. December was better, is a way to summarize that. When you look over on the export front, that's a bit more of a mixed bag. So beef and pork had export demand gained in November compared to October. Chicken had a decline. Beef and chicken were both up compared to 2019, and pork was down. But again, we need to be careful how we phrase that, because Asian demand for pork was quite strong by that point in the 2019 numbers. So we're comparing against strong bases. Overall, export demand was pretty strong as we ended 2020, given what was going on in the broader marketplace. So I hope that made sense to everybody. December demand is stronger per the meat demand monitor. November was a rough month per both different measures.
But when you look at beef compared to the competing meats, faring relatively well, one would have to say, given all concerning food service, consumption decline, and the like.
Very much so. I certainly was of that opinion when it was warmer weather, because we were able to grill and so forth. I've been concerned going into the winter and remain concerned, but been pleasantly surprised in lots of ways. How would middle meats and higher end products hold up when we can't run to the grill quite the same? Curbside pickup on steaks doesn't work as well as a curbside pickup on a hamburger, those kind of things. And when you put all those concerns on the table, I've been pleasantly surprised at how things have held up. So U.S. consumers have stuck with stronger beef demand than I would have anticipated. And I'll gladly admit I was wrong in being too pessimistic.
And looking ahead, this coming Friday, that cattle inventory report out from the USDA. This is an eagerly awaited account every year, Glynn. Any thoughts ahead of it?
Well, it's certainly important every year. I think this year, at least I personally have a harder time kind of getting my arms around what to expect. I will cut to the chase and say I expect the national beef cow herd to be down slightly, but maybe not as much as some others. So if it comes down, maybe 1%, something like that order, would not surprise me. The reason that I'm not expecting much of a pullback is, yes, we had a very volatile year, one for the memory bank, one that most don't want to relive. But by the time you account for CARES, federal aid, payments to farmers and so forth, the profitability shock for a lot of cow-calf producers wasn't nearly as large as what some of us were anticipating when we were talking about this back in April and May, kind of in the thrust of the worst of it. And for those that waited to make decisions, in the summer as it related to retention and so forth, that might have mitigated some of the concerns and anxiety to get out of the industry, so to speak. So I think those funds had a mitigating effect on exit. They certainly had a boosting effect on meat demand, so I think they did also on the supply side. And I think at the end of the day, we might see a fairly calm, slight decline in the herd size in that report. But it does come out on Friday. It'll be posted late Friday afternoon. It will have state-level information in it for those that want to dig into the Kansas numbers and so forth.
We'll see what the USDA has to say on the inventory on Friday. Glynn, as always, thanks for your input. We'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks for having me on, Eric.
Livestock economist Glynn Tonsor, K-State Research and Extension, on this week's Cattle Market segment. And we'll return with more for you. After this break, you're listening to Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Agriculture Today returns now, and next up for you, a couple of items for you cattle ranchers. The first drawn from the latest podcast out of the Beef Cattle Institute at K-State. The staff there routinely responds to listener questions on that podcast, and one posed recently related to implementing rotational grazing on a newly acquired and generally undeveloped grazing resource. The Institute's Brad White, Bob Larson, and Dustin Pendell weigh in.
We've got a piece of land, and we're thinking about, should we do cross fencing? Should we do rotational grazing? Where should we set up the corral? Should it be centrally located? Should it be on the ends? If it's a new piece of land, and this could be true whether you're leasing it or whether you own it, how do I figure out what's the best strategy for grazing?
Well, the caution for me is a lot of the things that they mentioned are going to have a pretty substantial cost, and they may be relatively permanent. So once I've put in the corrals and the fences, I don't want to move them. I mean, I suppose they're movable, but not very easily. So you really want to think that through carefully before you place things that are going to be pretty permanent.
Okay, so I'll argue with you a little bit. I agree. Before you place things that are pretty permanent, I totally agree. But let's say I've got a good perimeter fence.
Yeah.
I like setting up a single hot wire, and then I can kind of figure out, is that in the right place or is it not? Because what I haven't seen until I've worked on that land for a while is, where's the water runoff? Is this grass better than other grass? And I may set up some temporary / permanent fences that then later, if I like that, I can put a permanent fence up there, or I could be happy to have it. It also gives me flexibility. If it's a dry year, maybe I need to take this down and let these two paddocks become one. Or if I've got ample forage, I do the opposite.
Well, and, one of the things I was going to say is there are resources. There's grazing schools. There's online resources. A lot of states, a lot of universities have some pretty good information. And that's a place to go to get some baseline ideas on some of these things. So how big to make the paddocks? Well, that's going to drive how long you're going to have between moves of cattle and things. And so it's kind of like what you were saying before you can go online and get some plans. And I think that's a good idea to start with, but you're going to have to figure out for your own operation what's going to work. And so kind of a caution to put things very permanent until you've got some hands-on experience.
Totally agree. And you're absolutely right on the cost. And Dustin, I know you saw some stuff recently on cost of fencing.
Yeah, and the only thing I would like to add to those comments is when I hear the word like rotational grazing, I think Bob mentioned earlier, that could be pretty labor intensive. And so I think trying to figure all that out before you maybe put something more permanent, again, it comes back to you've got to make a plan, right? And maybe it is you run the hot wire, set up some temporary corrals just till you figure out you have the time, are you working off farm, et cetera. But yeah, a couple days ago, I was answering somebody else's question, and I came across a recent publication on fencing. So it talks about costs of barbed wire versus woven wire versus steel posts and all that different stuff. They did a survey, I believe, maybe it was about a year ago, specifically to Kansas, but I think you can probably use that as a pretty good start if you're looking at costs, at least from the fencing aspect.
Yeah, because there are a lot of different ways to put that fence up, and I described a single hot wire. That may not work in some situations, but you can compare the cost if you're doing your external fence between whether you need barbed wire, woven wire, high tensile wire, and there's pros and cons to each of those, of which cost is one. But there are some other aspects that may make a difference depending on your specific geographic region. Talk to me about water and rotational grazing.
Well, that's something that you really do have to consider if you're going to have multiple grazing paddocks, is each one of them has to have access to water. And that might be, a central water place or two, so a pond or a well-attached water, or it might be movable. So I've been on operations that, they used above ground pipes to move water and they'd move the tank as well. And again, the trade-offs there are, well, that's a lot of labor versus building a pond and or sinking several wells. That's an upfront cost to get that established, but then not as much labor. So obviously we're going to need water access to every place that the cattle are going to be, and that's something, again, that because of the lay of the land and what's available, that's something I would not want to make that call from my desk. I think you need to be boots on the ground to figure out what's going to work there. And
many of these things, water would be similar. You want to kind of get your paddocks figured out. So not only, and I think Dustin's point on start a plan, have a plan, test it, evaluate it. How well did it work? Do I need to move some of those paddocks around and readjust and then put in, and this is where you started, Bob, and I do agree with you on this. Before I put in pretty permanent things like water and my corral facility, I want to have a pretty good idea that this is working the way I want it to.
From the Beef Cattle Institute here at K-State, Dustin Pendell, Bob Larson, and Brad White. The full podcast at ksubci.org. Now, the other item of interest, K-State's upcoming series of winter Ranch Management Schools. These have been ultra-successful events in past years, and 3 have been lined out for the coming weeks, including the first this Thursday for you producers in western Kansas. K-State beef cattle specialist Dale Blassie is coordinating these.
We try to maintain the tradition of bringing well-needed topic material out to the country, especially with calving season right around the corner. In many areas of our state, we're into drought, so we need to be very considerate of body flesh and especially bull management and keeping those bulls at top performance as we approach this spring calving season. So, yes, it's a collection of efforts from my colleagues across the state, pulling this program together and having it in multiple locations.
There are 3 of these, as a matter of fact, and they are set for Hayes, January the 28th, then 2 on February the 16th, in the afternoon in Beaumont, and in the evening in Council Grove. More detail later, but you touched upon, Dale, a couple of the multiple topics that these will address at each of the sites, bull management and cow and heifer nutrition, but there's much more, you say.
That's correct. All these things that folks need to be thinking about. Dr. Sandy Johnson and others developed a wonderful software tool to help producers stay on top of their herd management, and it's called Management Minder. And I really encourage folks to visit ksubeef.org for a copy of this software. But in essence, we have a few of our county and district folks are going to be talking about its actual use. And so it allows you to schedule in when the necessary times are to order your vaccines and so forth. And in that same vein, we're also going to be talking about vaccine management and storage, making that investment and assuring yourself that when you do utilize it, that it is of the utmost quality in terms of how you store it and, of course, how you actually administer it.
And you will get into further detail on handling those bulls, handling those females, as you mentioned. And your colleagues from around the state will be presenting at these sites, and the local extension folk will be contributing as well.
That's right. This is a complete team effort from K-State Research and Extension. My colleagues in Colby, Dr. Sandy Johnson, Dr. Justin Wagner out of Garden City, and Dr. Jamie Lynn Farney out of Chanute are all going to contribute based upon location. And then, of course, our local county and district faculty as well will contribute to the overall program.
And the hallmark of these over the past years have been the opportunities to interact with the specialists to the benefit of the producer.
That's right. At the end, there'll be a town hall where if something is on somebody's mind, certainly there's been an allowance of time to allow that interchange to occur between the attendees as well as for our attending experts.
Well, Dale, if you would fill in the logistics, the dates and locations and times specifically.
Okay, so next Thursday, that's January 28th, we'll be in Hayes. Program will kick off at 6 o'clock. The Hayes location is going to be virtual. It will be a virtual program. So even if you might be a few miles away from Hayes and that particular day works for you, I encourage you to visit the ksubeef.org website and get yourself registered on Zoom to participate. The other 2 programs on February the 16th will be live contact, the good old-fashioned meetings of old that we fondly remember. That'll be in Beaumont, Kansas. That program will start at 1 to 3. And later that evening in Council Grove, that program will begin at 5:15, and they have an added treat in terms they have a local veterinary service. Rockin' KM is going to talk about how to fix small dystocias. When is it best to call your veterinarian? So an added tidbit there as well for those attendees in Council Grove. For information on registering and also the contact for making sure you get yourself registered, please go to ksubeef.org. That's ksubeef, one word, .org.
K-State's Dale Blassie there on the 2021 Winter Ranch Management Schools. Again, the first this Thursday, January the 28th, virtually out of Hayes. The other 2 on Tuesday, February 16th, in-person sessions at Beaumont and Council Grove in eastern Kansas. All the particulars on registration and otherwise at ksubeef.org. We'll return shortly with more on this Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, coming to you from the campus of Kansas State University. Eric Atkinson here, and next up for you, today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. The American Farm Bureau Federation has issued a report encouraging the USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service to rebuild farmers' trust in the agency's crop and livestock data by increasing transparency, accelerating the use of new technology, and potentially collaborating with Farm Bureau to help aid data collection efforts. The accuracy of monthly NASS reports is a constant source of discussion and speculation among producers. The Federation put together a farmer-led working group that spent more than 4 months looking at NASS processes and methodologies to develop recommendations for the agency's data collection and release of monthly reports. Now, top among those recommendations is that NASS should increase transparency with the agricultural community, saying that NASS needs to better explain how the agency arrives at its numbers reported and provide clarity on the relationship between aggregate, state, county, and field-level reported numbers. The Federation said that NASS should consider being flexible on the date of report releases when natural disasters occur. And Farm Bureau also wants NASS to use better technology, pointing to faster computers, algorithms, data, and proprietary models that are being used. The AFBF wants the agency to expand the resources, the information, and the data and software, as well as their staffs and their networks. While better technology and staff sound good, NASS has seen its budget trimmed in recent years. The agency's budget from 2017 to last year was down about $8 million. Farm Bureau noted the agency's 2021 budget included $10 million for a pilot study to use historically remotely sensed data and precision agricultural data. The Federation stated that congressional appropriations should increase investment in agricultural research and statistics to provide NASS access to high-performance computing capacity, data, software training, and staff resources. Farm Bureau added that the group would also like to collaborate with NASS to help encourage farmers to participate in agency surveys and continue to help organize USDA data user meetings. Family farms comprise 96% of all U.S. farms, accounting for 87% of land in farms and 82% of the value of all agricultural products sold. This according to the 2017 Census of Agriculture Farm Typology Report, which was released late last week by NASS. The Farm Typology Report primarily focuses on the family farm. That's defined as any farm where the majority of the business is owned by the producer and individuals related to the producer. The report classifies all farms into categories based on 2 criteria: who owns the operation and gross cash farm income. The data show that small family farms, those farms with a gross income of less than $350,000 per year, account for 88% of all U.S. farms, 46% of total land in farms, and 19% of the value of all agricultural products sold. Large-scale family farms with a gross income of $1 million or more make up less than 3% of all U.S. farms, but produce 43% of the value of all agricultural products. And mid-sized farms, those with a gross income between $350,000 and $999,000, are 5% of U.S. farms and produce 20% of the value of all agricultural products. The data also show that the number of family farms decreased by 4%. That would be almost 80,000 farms since 2012. Large and mid-sized family farms experiencing steeper declines, decreasing 13% and 8% respectively. Small family farms experiencing a smaller decline. Other key findings from this farm typology report were that farm specialization varies by farm size. The majority of small family farms specialize in cattle or other crops, such as hay or forage. Over half of mid-sized farms specialize in grain and oilseeds, and large-scale family farms vary more in product specialization, though they're more likely than other family farms to specialize in dairy production or in specialty crops. And small family farms account for 45% of all direct sales to consumers, compared to 17% for mid-sized family farms and 23% for large-scale family farms. Precision agriculture is not just about a greater degree of focus on inputs, but also a greater degree of extracting important data for decision-making, as we hear in this report from the USDA's Rod Bain.
For the agricultural inputs industry, precision agriculture and its potential continues to be explored and utilized. As Darren Kopic of the American Retailers Association notes,
we've made a lot of progress in that area, but there's a lot yet to be made, a lot we don't know.
One of the challenges facing producers and the input industry is what to do with expected large amounts of big data available to make management decisions.
How do I extract from that collection of data something that's going to let me go back to the farmer and say, based on all we know and what the weather's doing so far this year, this is the right amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, so forth, to put on your field to maximize your yields for next year.
Kopic acknowledges continued product innovation and technological advances, as well as the improved knowledge of such by both producers and the input retail sector, are important in progressing the scale and scope of precision agriculture. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
And to the agricultural calendar, reminding that K-State Agricultural Economics has been hosting and will continue to host a series of mini risk and profit conferences. A couple of those took place the last 2 weeks, and there are several more ahead, including one this coming Wednesday, and you can still take part. The one on this Wednesday will be covering agricultural policy and the Farm Bill, including the ARC PLC election decision. On board for this session will be K-State's Robin Reed and Jenny Ift. It'll run from 12 o'clock noon to 1:30 in the afternoon on Wednesday the 27th. Now, looking ahead, Wednesday, February the 3rd, there'll be a couple of sessions on ag technology across generations of farm operations and farmland values, as well as farm profitability. That's on the 3rd of February. Then Wednesday, February the 17th on agricultural finance and the international grain markets and outlook for 2021. If you'd like to take these in, it's as simple as checking with Rich Llewellyn here at K-State Agricultural Economics. You can contact him directly via email, rvl@ksu.edu. Again, that's rvl@ksu.edu. Or you can call Rich directly at 785-532-1504, 785-532-1504. Many risk and profit conference sessions are continuing with one this Wednesday. Look into that. And we'll be back with more on Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us on Agriculture Today. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. In this week's Youth Development segment, Kansas 4-H Extension Specialist Anissa Jepsen provides an update for those involved in horse contests and horse judging, as well as shooting sports and the Science of Agriculture Challenge. She says that Kansas 4-H youth interested in the Science of Ag Challenge should be thinking about forming their teams now, and that there are a few changes for this year's challenge. And there's quite a few things to cover today. Although not everything is finalized, the important thing here is the fact that things are moving forward just like they did last year. And one of the things we want to talk about is a little bit of a time change related to the Science of Ag teams.
Exactly. So I'm really excited that we are going to be moving forward with the Science of Ag competition. Again, a huge shout out to our sponsors last year, Corteva and Cargill, for making the contest possible. We are moving some timelines. So in the past few years during Science of Ag, January through March was kind of getting your teams together and then having your teams registered. This year, you can start looking at teams, but registration probably won't happen until April 30th. So this is a great time for coaches to be checking out our website at kansas4h.org, Science of Ag, looking at the preliminary information about Science of Ag, the pillars of agriculture. None of that will change, just that timeline for the contest. And just a reminder for those of you who are not familiar with Science of Ag, it's a hands-on learning experience that inspires the next generation of our ag leaders in Kansas. Teams of 3 to 5 youth in grades 6 through 12 will work with coaches and mentors to create research projects, develop solutions for things they see in their community or in need of in their community, and then top 3 teams get scholarships.
And another change this year is you're going to be working a little bit more closely with departments at Kansas State.
Yeah, so this was a really exciting development out of our contest last year. We had a lot of professors that had reached out to us about the competition, were really excited, and wanted the chance to partner with these teams and talk through research models and things like that. So we will be working with each team to pair them up with someone within K-State University that works in research in kind of the field that they've chosen, and hopefully can help them with some research principles and talking through the presentation prior to when they present at the state contest.
And these are all projects that the youth come up with themselves.
Yeah, and so that's the best part about this. The youth really are able to identify something that they see as a need within their community. And then their mentor that is going to work with them doesn't have to be an expert in that field. They actually will have help from, professors at K-State, people within our K-State Research and Extension. I can help them find mentors that can help with subject matter. They really are the coaches are the ones that help get the kids together and work on the project.
And they'll do the project. They'll also then present their findings as well.
Yes. And last year, of course, had some challenges. So we did do a lot of meeting virtually. We had some presentations that delivered the preliminary competition virtually. And so those are always options as they're moving forward. Kids are so good at now with Zoom meetings and things like that. We encourage you to not let any barriers from COVID or things like that to hinder your team's forming.
We also wanted to give an update on some of the things going on within the horse area. There are some changes there as well.
Right. So, of course, we know COVID has given us a lot of challenges. Normally, this time of year, we are at Rock Springs at the Panorama, which I know everyone really enjoys. And this year, we are unable to do that. We do not want anyone to not be working on those contests because we are still going to have the contests that are normally held at Panorama and at Equifest. So as of right now, we do know that hippology will be virtual. We're working on getting dates and working with some of our neighboring states that have already hosted virtual hippology contests to help us kind of get the best case scenario for our Kansas youth. We'll also be doing the model horse and public presentations virtually. So you'll be able to get more information within the next couple of weeks. As of right now, we're trying to move the horse judging contest in person. We don't have any more information about that yet. We're working on trying to figure out locations, dates, and then, of course, making sure we can stay within our KSRE COVID limitations and K-State limitations and make the contest as safe as possible. Great thing about horse judging is we can normally be outside, so that's going to be our plan, hopefully.
Yeah, and the important thing here is, as you mentioned, just keep practicing and keep moving forward just as if everything is going to happen as we hope it can happen.
Exactly. And then as you think through, I know we had some changes last year to our overall horse showing area, and we are moving forward with district horse shows in the summer. I know that we have districts already working on that. State Fair Horse Show is looking to stay the same. So as of now, those things are moving forward as they did pre-COVID.
As if you don't have enough on your plate, you're also in charge of shooting sports, and spring matches are still being held.
That's right. So again, we are encouraging all counties that use qualifiers or host qualifiers within their counties to work with their county point of contact agent to talk through COVID restrictions within their local units to see if they can host a qualifier. We, as a state office, are working with our volunteers on our spring match committee to find locations and to get a date nailed down to have our state qualifying match in person at this point. As soon as those dates and locations are reserved, we will make sure that we share that out with the entire system. Just know that if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at ajepsen@ksu.edu.
And a lot of this information is posted to the website, the 4-H website, but also the Facebook page as well.
Right. So as things change and as we move forward, make sure just to be watching our Facebook page. Check out our website. Once we get dates and things nailed down, we'll be putting those up with any of the forms or things that you'll need to move forward on any of these opportunities.
I know it's been challenging for you. It's been challenging for the 4-H youth members as well. But one good thing, it looks like we are making a little bit of progress. So maybe at some point this year, things will get back to as it was before COVID.
That's right. We're really happy that our volunteers have worked so hard to keep offering different opportunities to our youth in these project areas. They have went outside of the box and thinking about ways to be safe and to continue to just be great mentors and have a relationship with our youth, and we're really grateful for that.
That's Kansas 4-H Extension Specialist Anissa Jepsen. For more information on the Science of Agriculture Challenge, horse contests and horse judging or shooting sports, visit kansas4h.org. Or you can contact your local county or district extension office. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.